When I first started, I didn't put a lot of value on communication. My goal was always to complete the project, right? Like that's where I focused on, making sure that I meet the deadlines. But soon after that, I realized the communication is so important, right? Going above and beyond to explain everything.
Sarah Abdul-Rasoul, thank you so much for joining us today.
For having me. I'm really excited to be recording the podcast.
As well, you're somebody that I've been eager to speak to for a little while here. Just reading through some of your accomplishments here, one of them that stood out to me, you were selected as a top woman in safety, which is no small feat there. As well, having worked in some larger organizations, including Toyota, definitely, you bring a certain perspective that I think a lot of people will find valuable here. A good place for us to start probably would be just having you running us through just your background, where you started and how you got to where you are today.
A bit of recap of how I got here started when I went to University of Waterloo for a Bachelor of Science. And the goal after that was to go to the School of Pharmacy. And during my undergraduate studies, I got the opportunity to work in our small local neighborhood pharmacy, which was a good opportunity to see what it was like to be a pharmacist. And after working there for several months, I realized that that was not the right career path for me. I was more motivated about helping people, but more in a proactive way versus a reactive way. So more towards the prevention versus the treatment side of things. And that's when I realized I had to think of what's next, right? Like where to go after that. So after graduation, came across the public health program at Ryerson University, and that was a post-grad 2-year degree program. And with my background in biology, and I did really well in microbiology, I thought it was great to do the courses and then get the certification and then become a public health inspector. And by the time I came across to the program, I was late in applying, and I heard back that there was a large number of applicants, and I was put on the wait list for the program. And from that, I was called them back just to find out if there's any way on which I can still get in the programs. And they said that the occupational health and safety program had less applications, and I could start there. And I thought, it would be good to start there and then hopefully transfer after that to a public health program. And I was thinking inside me, just my thoughts thinking, there's less people applying to the occupational health and safety program. It must be less common, or there's not much job opportunities or things like that, right? I was like, okay, but I'll take it. I'll go there and then I'll hopefully transfer after that. But when I started taking the occupational health and safety program courses and getting the chance to be part of group work that involved practical training by going to different workplaces and seeing what that was like really interested me. I finished the program, and then from there, I started working as an EHS consultant. So I got a lot of experience working with industrial hygiene monitoring, completing designated substance surveys, some mold sampling, asbestos, and working in different workplaces to get a chance to see what it was like to complete different programs and training and standards. And then shortly after that, I started working at Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada, and my role did change over time. When I first started, I was more involved in supporting the shops and the supervisors with workplace inspections, incident investigations, and then I slowly moved on to support more with industrial hygiene monitoring and evaluations. And then I went on to support with the EHS different softwares that we have here at TMMC. So that involved a lot of work with the implementation and the support for the different users, and then moving from one software to the another, getting all the users to be equipped with all those changes. My focus now is more on auditing, so a lot of the safety audits. So that encompasses the legal compliance audits, a bunch of third-party audits, and the Toyota safety management systems internal audits.
You couldn't have really predicted that path from the start, hey?
Oh, no, definitely not. Yeah.
And some of that experience, though, I bet was incredibly helpful, especially with, you mentioned that you were in microbiology and then you ended up, doing certain samples with, maybe biological hazards or molds, right? Sampling the molds and that mindset. Were you able to kind of, I guess that scientific thought, has that ever kind of been beneficial in any of your current roles?
Yes, definitely, especially when it comes to the industrial hygiene side of it. It's very important to have that background, right, in science to be able to science and to see what it's like with biology and chemistry, to see what it's like when you're doing the sampling, when you're doing the monitoring, and also when you're communicating the hazards, right, whether it's chemical hazards and communicating that to the different team members, right? Just making sure that they understand the health hazards. It really helps to have that science background.
Something else that stood out to me was you mentioned when you were first looking to get into a career, you were trying to find something that wasn't reactive, it was proactive, preventative, right? And getting ahead of the issue before it happens. In your safety programs that you're designing, what are some of those things that you're looking for to kind of shift from to preventative? Because it can oftentimes, unfortunately, be the case where it's more reactive, right? You try to fix things after, it's human nature, right? After something goes wrong. So how do we kind of start to shift that mentality?
I think it's becoming easier to do that, right? Especially when you have softwares in place that support with, let's say, detecting the near misses, right? So looking at common areas where you see a lot of near misses, then you're likely to see, why do we have those near misses, right? So let's go and action that. Let's see if the countermeasures that we have in place are effective. And if they're not effective, then you're trying to find better ways in which to bring better control measures in place. And this is where I find it's good to, we follow a lot for our programs, the PDCA, the Plan, Do, Check, Act. So it's good that when first you're planning, right? You're planning for something, a big program or a big project to roll through. And then after you complete the project, you have that check part, right? So you're checking to make sure that program is effective. So that's a way in which you're being proactive, right? And if it's not effective, then you're going back to see how you can improve that program. So it's really good to follow that when you're trying to create new programs or trying to create new standards, especially the ones that are new to the overall organization. And there's going to be it's going to affect the health and safety of a lot of workers.
And it's great that you bring up one of the frameworks that you use, and there's so many of them, different frameworks, that it can be tough to really go about picking one that works. How do you go about really selecting what frameworks or ways to think about safety for the worker? How do you go about picking those, thoughtfully?
It would be an analysis in the beginning, right? Depending on what the program is and who your audience is going to be, right? Like who's going to be. So it really depends. But I feel like lately it's been following the PDCA because it does kind of help get you to see the full cycle, right? Of how the program runs. And I like the fact that it gives you that check part, right? Where you're always going back to see if the program is working. And then hearing the feedback, like doing surveys, the different training, and hearing the feedback also from the employees really helps, because when they feel like they are giving the chance to express their concerns about a certain program, then it's more likely to gain the acceptance and for it to be successful to work. So that aspect of that is also really helpful.
It's a good point you bring up, because there's a lot of, I've heard this quite a bit, that the more that we can actually engage the worker, because they actually know quite a bit, right? These are the people that are all in the day to day. They understand the risks probably more than we would think. And if we can really engage the knowledge of everyone and have their input, and then they see that their input is actually taken not just for granted, but actually taken seriously and implemented, that can almost engage them more in the program, right? And get them a little bit more buy-in is what I've kind of heard. Have you kind of seen that yourself?
Definitely. And we always remind the workers that safety starts with you, right? You know more about the equipment, you know more about the process. So if you see something that you don't feel is safe or you don't feel like it's working the way it should be, then make sure you always stop what you're doing and call for assistance before proceeding. Call health and safety, follow your internal responsibility system. It's very important to make sure that you're emphasizing that for them. And that's part of the overall culture. Safety and productivity have to go hand in hand, right? In order for you to have a successful company. So once you're making sure that your team members do know that you are always supporting safety and making sure that you're always answering their concerns and also helping them by providing them a tool to report those concerns, providing them some tool to report the concerns, and they're seeing that their concerns are getting the countermeasure and the actions that it needs, and it's getting closed out, then they're like, okay, they're more likely to continue to participate, right? Just getting that positive feedback that thank you for participating, thank you for completing that, right? Sometimes it's supporting them through some incentives, sometimes it's completing the action in time, right? And then showing them that it was completed. That does really support with making sure that they continue to be engaged and accountable for their safety and the safety of others that work around them.
It's an interesting topic, that recognition, especially when it comes to larger organizations, because it takes a lot more, I get in my mind, a lot more planning, right? To kind of go about this effectively. And how are we going to recognize? Because if you're in a small company, it's great to have everyone, you gather around, do the shout out, right? Say, hey, this was a great example of safety. But when you're in such a large organization and you have all those that different feedback coming your way, how do you kind of manage all those different, I get all that feedback that you're kind of collecting from the surveys?
Yes. So managing the best way would be to have a software that like some sort of software that where they can easily, everybody's got some way right now to go online, right? And report concerns. And it's easier to track it that way, right? So once they put the concern, it goes into the supervisor that is responsible for closing it out. And then this is where like safety gets involved and everybody who's responsible to close out those concerns. And then that way also the team member gets to see, right, that concern got closed out. When you're giving them some sort of a tool, it does help to show that also. And then that way we have data, the safety department has data to kind of track and see, oh, and in this shop, we had this many concerns that were brought up, and it was about that specific equipment or that specific process, right? So it does help to have that, to have it all in one system, because that way you have a way of tracking it, right? And tracking the completion. And also it does help too with recognition, because that way you can take that and see if you do a draw, right? Then that way you're picking randomly, sometimes picking not randomly, sometimes seeing things that are rated as very critical, and you're picking team members that have addressed very critical concerns, right? To recognize them. And there's so many ways to, even in big companies, there's so many ways to be able to recognize team members, right? So they have safety meetings in which you can recognize them in there, right? You can have incentives for them, right? So you can give them, for example, gift cards, like coffee gift cards or small things here and there, right? But it does show, studies do show that those positive reinforcements does more likely promote them to continue to participate in the program.
It's a huge part, right? Of just going that little extra bit. It doesn't take a lot, like you said. It can be just a gift card, something small, but it just shows that you recognize it, right? And you're willing to go out of your way to really show your appreciation. And I'm sure you've seen the results from that.
Yes, it's definitely works, and sometimes it's just the supervisor, right, going and saying thank you for bringing this up, right? Just thanking them sometimes is really good too, right? So it does really help. The positive reinforcement is really effective.
Those sort of small interpersonal relationships and that relationship building, I'm sure it plays probably a bigger piece than we know, right? Those sort of that day to day, how are you actually interacting with people and getting their feedback just on the floor? I've heard from a few different folks that, that was kind of a skill that they maybe wished they had developed a little bit more, especially in the safety spaces, learning how to communicate properly with people. Have you found that's a skill that's kind of, benefited you?
Yeah, I would say 100%. When I first started, I didn't put a lot of value on communication. My role was always, or my goal was always to complete the project, right? Like that's where I focused on making sure that I meet the deadlines. But soon after that, I realized I'm like, the communication is so important, right? Going above and beyond to explain everything, to make sure they understand why we're implementing this project, why we're making this change, really helps in the overall, in the acceptance of that project, right? And then that way you're being more transparent. You're explaining everything to them. You're showing how this, in the end, you're trying to make things better. So it's communication is really an important key element in becoming, let's say, a successful health and safety professional, I would say.
This episode is powered by BIS Safety Software, one of the leading safety and compliance software applications on the market today. Their smart training matrix helps you assign and track mandatory, optional, and location-specific training automatically based on roles and locations in your organization. Whether you're managing compliance, onboarding new employees, or rolling out location-based safety programs, the Matrix makes it easy to keep everything on track and organized. With auto assignment, progress tracking, certification programs, and built-in refresher support, it's your full training roadmap streamlined. See everything they have to offer at bissafety.ca.
And it makes sense, but it's, not always easy to go out of your way and practice. It sometimes might be a little bit easier to just kind of hide behind the paperwork, right? And kind of manage from a distance, but getting out there is something I'm sure that's crucial. Another topic that I'm curious to get your thoughts on, I know that you've spoken a little bit about psychological safety, right? This is something that you hear quite a bit of nowadays. It's really coming around and it's important. Can you tell us a little bit about what psychological safety is and why it is so important?
I would say psychological health and safety have become really wide known in the last couple of years, right? So it's a lot of companies have been focusing more on that component as part of their overall company health and safety program. So, and the focus has been more on wellness, right? Providing more wellness resources to team members, because when you show the team members that you do care about their health and wellness, then they're more likely to be more productive, right? And more supportive with your programs. What we've seen, especially like offering simple things, right? Like flexibility, offering different resources to help them manage their work-life balance, reducing that burnout, right, that's happening, has been quite supportive for them. I know from working at Toyota, we do offer a lot of resources. Lately, we even have like support, like wellness centers inside of the plant that actually supports the team members. Yes. So it's really good to kind of see that. And we have different resources. We partner up with different organizations to offer simple things as like online training, right? For certain topics that they might have concerns about, right? Or it's really good to see more companies right now are developing those programs to support their team members.
It's really great to hear that that's something that, organization like Toyota has gone out of their way to do. What is that impact been for the workers? Have you kind of heard some positive feedback on the wellness centers?
I do hear a lot of positive feedback. It's good to have that available for them, especially when it's they can access that in the workplace, right? It's easier than having to go after work and go to that. So it definitely gained positive feedback, and this is why it continued, right? And it's available throughout the plants. So yeah, it's been pretty positive to see that, and I think also helpful for team members. Seeing their overall well-being be really good, then it helps with the overall productivity of the organization.
And, it's a good point, because I think if we can start to make safety and productivity almost two sides of the same coin, right? How do we actually bring these two together? Because I'm, I don't want to speak for you, but I've heard where a lot of times there can be almost that fight where it's like, we've got to get the things done and we've also got to do it safely. And there's almost this kind of this butting in directions, right? We want to do it fast, but we also got to do it safe. But the more that we can find those commonalities and common ground, I'm sure it can go a long way, I imagine.
It's really shows that the organization is committed, right? That it shows that management is committed to the well-being of the employees. Once you're showing them that, then they're more likely to participate in your programs, right? And they're more likely to give their all. It's good to kind of see that, right? And it definitely adds value to the organization.
And brings meaning to your work. Like you said, you tried a few different career paths, right? And you were looking for something where you could really make a difference. And I'm sure this is kind of, when you think of that, how can I make a difference? This is pretty exceptional in that it really does allow you to have an impact, a direct impact on their well-being.
Definitely. Our projects are always proactive, right? So we're always trying to improve our overall system. So whether it's the new programs that we have or the new standards or different ideas that we're bringing forward, it's always to try to support the team members. That's the overall goal in the end, right? So it's really nice to see that. And this is why I think it's interesting too, right? Because no day-to-day is the same, right? You're always involved in different activities, so you get to see different sides of things. Lately, just being part of the whole auditing and getting the chance to talk to the team members, right? When we're doing our audits, getting the chance to interview the team members and hear their feedback, that's been really rewarding in the end, right? Seeing where they see concerns, right? And seeing that the programs are actually effective or not, right? Getting the chance to have that talk with them is really been rewarding too.
It comes to having those conversations with the employees, right? And building that relationship where people feel comfortable actually bringing up concerns. This is another part of the psychological safety piece, right? How do we get people to feel comfortable in bringing their concerns up? What have you found are some of the best ways to really get that conversation going and keep that relationship once it's established?
I think it's really good, and as a safety professional, it's really good to have the social skills, right? When you're trying, and when you're asking the questions, you're asking them in a way that the team members feel comfortable answering your questions, right? So and then that way, and you're also asking them simple questions, right? Where it's like, I'm interested in improving this, right? What do you think? What are some reflections that you can give me from the work that you've been completing, or what are some concerns that you've seen that you can support me in making this better? It's the way you approach it, I feel, that really makes a difference, right? If you're coming in and saying, I really need you to answer those questions, right? And you've got like 5 minutes before it, like, then you're not really getting much of that, right? So it really, the perception of it all is really important too. It really, when you're trying to remind them that you're helping them, we're working toward a common goal, which is for everyone to go home safely the way they came. And it's important in the end to make sure that you're always reminding them of that, right? And just because we've always done it this way, it doesn't mean it's right. There's always room for improvement, room for change to happen.
I love that. Yeah, it's so important. In building that momentum in a safety program, how do you avoid falling into a place where there might be complacency, right? So in any program, if it's really doing well, you might get to a point where, well, incidents are down, right? Or hopefully, as few as possible. But how do you really make sure that you're still on your toes and looking out for where risks might have not shown up yet, or where we haven't identified them yet?
I think lately with developing skills, right? Like the more as a safety professional, the more you're developing skills, the more you're learning, the more you're taking training, it does help too, right? It shows you different approaches and different ways in order to accomplish different programs. It motivates you more to continue to improve. Having proactive programs always on the go does help too, right? So that way you're always looking for what's next, what's new, how can we improve something, right? It's that continuous improvement is really important, and it's one of the high values that we have at Toyota, where it's like continuous improvement, continuous improvement. There's always ways to do that. And for a lot of our programs, we have a certain period, like 24 months, where it needs to get reviewed. It needs to go through that the review process. So it gives you the chance to go look at it again and see if you're still up to date with regulations, with standards, right? And the goal is always to go above and beyond that, right? So that kind of gives you the motivation to continue to explore new opportunities.
And almost setting, like you said, right? Setting kind of going above and beyond, setting your own standards in a way, right? Here's the level that we need to be compliant. What's the level that we can get to that really would make us stand out and excel? And part of that, like you said, training is a great way to continuous training, right? To make sure that it's not just, one and done, right? You're continuously improving, looking for ways to grow. I'm curious, having now, been in your career for some time and got some experience, what is some advice that, if you could give yourself looking back, right? Thinking, Sarah, way back when she was just starting out in the safety space, what is one piece of advice that, you really wish that you could have given yourself?
I'd say when I first started, I was more interested in finding a specific area where I can specialize in safety, right? So you can specialize like industrial hygiene and ergonomics, in supporting systems. I was really eager to kind of get to be in that one area and specialize in it. But seeing different changes, being able to explore those different areas really helped me kind of see the overall big picture, right? So seeing that there's so many areas, right? And being able to experience a lot of those areas and being able to lead projects in them is really interesting and rewarding. And I wouldn't go back to being like, okay, yes, I need to have that specific field. I need to be an expert in that specific field and kind of shift all my interest into that, right? And that's something that I would definitely advise is to be able to explore different areas and see the right fit for you. I also would advise, I did get my Canadian Registered Safety Professional designation as soon as I got the experience to do that. So I would definitely advise any new safety professional to also get that. And also volunteering. I think it's really rewarding to volunteer. I do volunteer with the board. I've been volunteering with them for the last 7 years. So I think it's really interesting to not only network, but get to meet people in your same industry, but also in different sectors, right? And to hear their opinion and their experience of what it's like to be working in health and safety.
You know, there's a lot of great points there. One of them that, stood out to me, at least, that I've found true as well is, yeah, like get out there and try to find different things that interest you, right? Get some broad experience. And then afterwards, you're kind of able to narrow it down. But if you haven't tried, and like you said, almost with every career path out there is so much opportunity, and it's such a wide array of different things that you can actually do. You'd probably be surprised if you go out and look, right? And volunteering is a great way to try out different things as well, right? And kind of build on that experience. Something that we also talk a lot, quite a bit about here on the podcast is mentorship, right? And finding mentors. I'm curious, in safety, are there any, individuals that you kind of go to when you need some help with maybe a tough safety problem?
I did gain a lot of wisdom from mentors over the years, and I think everyone in safety is always willing to share their reflections, their safety stories, right? How they got there. So it's really helpful to see that. I would say I gained a lot of experience from talking to others and learning from others, right? Through the different networking areas. I've been part of the Women in Occupational Health and Safety Society. So that got me also part of their mentorship program too. So I got to experience what it was like being part of that and learning more about specific areas in health and safety. So that's been really helpful too. And also in our safety team in Toyota, we're pretty supportive, right, with each other. If anybody's got like concerns or questions, or I find it unique being in health and safety because you do have a lot of decision making that you have to do on a daily basis, and that does affect if someone's going to go home safely or not, right? So it's having that chance to be able to have a team where you're always sharing insights and reflections, and it really does help to kind of support with that, getting that support within your team as well.
Yeah, and like you said, finding those communities that you can join, right? Great way. Like you said, the Women in Safety. I'm sure there's all kinds of groups on LinkedIn or maybe within your own organization, right? Like you said, in Toyota itself, there's many different people that are able to kind of fill that. But no one person can kind of take on the challenge, right? We all got to work together in a way to really to build and grow in the right direction. Sarah, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. It was phenomenal getting your insights and a lot to think about on our end here. Where can people find what you're up to, maybe what Toyota's up to?
On LinkedIn. Yeah, that's where you can find me. And if you have any questions, you can easily reach out to me there.
Appreciate it, Sarah. Take care.